my main question is, given what's going on in Ukraine and the fact that there could be a nuclear accident, um, there's been a run on potassium iodide tablets in Europe and throughout the world. I was curious to know what you would recommend if such an accident did occur. And secondly, I don't know if you could briefly describe what you do when you go on an airplane before and after and during, using the colloidal silver and your negative ion device, or anything else you could share that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so Ukraine is the latest concern we have about potential nuclear holocaust. I spend a lot of time generally in Europe and recognize that some of the countries there have actually told populations since Chernobyl they should not inhabit that part of the country they're living in for at least 100,000 years. So this is a real thing. And there's seemingly a perpetual need for people to sabotage human existence. And it's humans doing that. It's not other creatures doing it. So with that said, no question the potassium iodine would be helpful, but something that we've known for years, and I used when I went to Russia after Chernobyl and worked with the government there, and physicians and research scientists out of both universities in Moscow and St. Petersburg, is we were putting people in very hot bathtubs right up to their nose so they could only breathe for at least 20 to 30 minutes. And it was saturated with kelp. And we were also having them consume high amounts, 100 to 200, depending upon their weight, little tablets of chlorella. So we know the algae are actually antidotes to radiation poisoning. Now, continuing on with radiation, many of the listeners may not know, a plane ride from New York City to Los Angeles, you're receiving the equivalent of 28 X-rays. That's what accrues in your body from cosmic radiation that comes from the atmosphere. Obviously, the little tiny metal is not going to prevent that. It may even amplify it, frankly. So ever since I was aware enough to do this 40 years ago, I've been taking silver and the nostril spray type, and every hour, starting when I'm getting on the plane, thereafter, I spray 2 spurts up each nostril, blow out and suck in, and place 2 spurts down my throat. Now, they recycle the air for the last 15 or 20 years. And so if somebody's sick in the front of the plane and you're in the last seat, it's being recycled. So that actually drops the percentage of people getting sick. We know the average 2.5-hour plane ride, approximately 15% of people get sick on every one of those planes. And if you've ever seen microscopic exposés on what a plane looks like and the seats look like, it's difficult for me to get on planes. I have to, and I do it anyway. The next thing, forever I've been using a personal oxygen device. And the newest ones from Asia are tremendous because they work with electron activity and actually kill off every microbe. So you put them around your neck. I should have worn one today to show you. And 3 feet in every direction around me, in front of me and around me, it permeates that. So if somebody coughs or somebody is sick in some way, it cannot get through that virtual shield. It's not really even virtual, it's real, but it's an invisible shield that you see. So that should be around your neck. My wife wears one here all of the time. And by the way, it's something that would be wise for you to put in the bag that you always take before you get onto a plane. This is what I do so I don't forget to do it, which I used to do all of the time. One bag, no matter what plane I go on, that is in that bag. There's other things that you may want. Everyone wants to watch movies on the plane. And so you have to get earbuds that are not going to zap your brain and give you brain cancer. And there's GIA, G-I-A, that makes a great set. I've been using those for about 30 years now. And these are things that people, common sense things, inexpensive things, that just a little bit of effort is going to make your life much healthier and longer, by the way. Good questions.
Do you think nattokinase should also be used to prevent blood clots on planes?
If somebody has they're prone to blood clots, yes. Natto, which is actually a traditional Japanese food, highly fermented, almost like a paste, soy, which doesn't have the estrogenic effect. So I'm not worried about that with cancer. Literally is when they compare it to the meds, Plavix, et cetera, they get about the same results. So much safer to do. But if you're a person who's going to go on a very long plane ride, for instance, 24 hours, even a healthy person, it may not be a bad thing to consider.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for that, David, and thank you, Brian. Next, we have Wendy. Wendy, what is your question?
Yes, please. I have two questions. One about fermented foods. Are they healthy if I take a raw cabbage and ferment it with Himalayan sea salt? And the second question is I get my spirulina from Chile, from the spring water reserve. Is spirulina healthy for a vegan person?
Well, let's start with spirulina, and then we'll go back to your first question. So spirulina, like chlorella, has an inherent shell on it. And so most spirulinas on the market are very difficult to digest. So when we investigated this 40 some years ago, we recognized that there's a unique lake here in the United States, Clement Lake, that is volcanic. So the center of this massively large lake is only 8 feet deep. Most areas it's 2-3 feet. Now that part of Oregon is uniquely sunny. It only rains 5 days a year. So this is like an environment that nature created that's nowhere else that we've discovered so far. Very large, shallow lake, very sunny area. So it's a perfect growing ground for algae. And blue-green algae is spirulina. It's another way we talk about it, a cyanobacteria. Now, when you talk about them, all of them have shells because in most environments, they require shells to preserve them. In this unique lake, they have a glucanase, carbohydrate-based cell wall, so even an infant can digest it. So that would be what I would suggest. This is the one I've been taking now for 4 decades, given my children, and have suggested to hundreds of thousands of people over the time. And your first question, once again, was?
Fermented foods.
Fermented food, I'm a major fan of. If you look at what I spoke about recently on The Real Truth About Health, the importance of bacteria, I talked about the types of bacteria, how to get the bacteria. You may want to review that when it comes up. I talked about people who live long lives. Almost every one of these tribes consistently consume fermented food. Now, it is so easy to make sauerkraut, the same juicer that you would make a slow turning juicer, wheatgrass in or green juice, not fast centrifugal juicer that kills everything and oxidizes it, but like the teeth, slow turning without oxidize. And you put cabbage through that, it homogenizes the cabbage. And if you like it a little more rough, then you can cut some pieces up, put it in, sit it out with a screen on top of it for 3 days in your kitchen. And by the way, you have sauerkraut within a matter of 3 days. It doesn't take months like we were taught traditionally by Germans and other people. Kimchi, you can do the same thing with. You can also take organic cabbage juice and actually take any vegetable, cut them small enough, soak them for a week in that, and you have fermented. Now, you talked about sodium. I wouldn't put sodium. We don't put sodium in ours here at Hippocrates that we have out consistently, but you may feel you need that. Traditional ones put juniper berries in it, wakame, a seaweed, so you get massive amounts of minerals, and it actually makes the wakame digestible that way. So there's lots of fun things you can do with the sauerkraut or with the kimchi. Big fan of fermented foods because it helps both your brain, your psyche, and your immunity. Who you really are, your brain and immunity.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, Wendy, for that. Next, we have Stephanie. Stephanie, what is your question?
Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for taking our questions. Huge fan of your work. So I have 2 questions. First question is, I'm a 39-year-old, relatively healthy female, but I just found out that I had high blood pressure and tachycardia. So throughout this conference, one of the most controversial things is the fats, the nuts, the seeds, the oils, the avocados, and I've been kind of confused about that. What would your advice be for me, like portion wise, how much to eat, how often to eat them? Should I be eating them? Should I, that's the first question. And then the second one is, how do you feel about food grade hydrogen peroxide, either switched around in the mouth for oral health or taken for general health orally? Thank you so much.
Well, your grandmother had two medicines in her medicine cabinet, iodine and hydrogen peroxide. But we've come a long way in science since those days. They're both disinfectants, and we make stabilized oxygens that you can buy at the health store that are safe. So when you're ingesting them, they're not going to harm you. If you, by mistake, swallow too much intense hydrogen peroxide, it would have a negative outcome. And by the way, you don't absorb as much as you would with a stabilized oxygen. Big fan of them, use them all of the time. Secondly, when you talk about high blood pressure, first and foremost, is always accompanied by stress. So a lot of people may eat healthy diets, but they don't exercise much to let the gas valve go off, to relax. And by the way, they're in a stressful relationship. They're not happy with their job or all of the above. And that it precipitates that. Just like if I screamed at the top of my lungs now, all of you would get stressed and you'd stop breathing and the blood pressure would go up instantaneously. The second thing you have to look at to rule out, because well over 90% of the people do not have this problem, but it's a possibility, is our medical team. I would look at, for instance, the kidney, the creatine, the bun, because if, by the way, you're one of the rare cases that have a kidney concern, no matter what you eat, you could have a blood pressure problem. You can work with it, but you have to know that's a causative reason. Now, the big thing is, let's get back to that question about oil and not oil and all of this other stuff. Being the director of the oldest plant-based institute in the world that created lifestyle medicine, we made the word lifestyle medicine back almost 70 years ago. Basically, we have been watching what people do, eating moderate amounts of oil, exercising. Everyone gets psychotherapy here to learn how to tame their brain and calm their stress. A little bit of oil is not going to be the reason that you'd end up with high blood pressure. If you're eating animal oil, just my presentation today, it's every bit of that's linked to high blood pressure. No question. And what's ironic to me is some of the plant-based doctors that are going to tell you how it's evil and oil is bad, et cetera, almost act like it's animal fat that you're eating. It's not the same thing. Now, there's saturate, monosaturate, polyunsaturated. Some are easier to go through the body than others. But my understanding clearly, not only from the work I've done since 1970, but the work that's being done on the front line of science globally, is that oils are necessary for healthy bodies. Now, doesn't mean you take a lot of oil. At one point, I would eat my salad with my oil. That's not what I'm talking about. A very small amount of oil being used and eating foods that are germinated. So if you take any food, any plant-based food, they have oil in it. Mostly omega oils, oleic acids, good oils, ones your body and brain require. And if you germinate it, those fats are already broken down to essential fatty acids, making it remarkably more usable by the body for energy. If you're just taking oil out of a bottle, which I'll tell you, occasionally I still do and spray on my salad. I did before I came today to talk to you. It's not the same. It's really something that you may want to avoid, but you certainly do need to get oils for your brain and body and energy function to have. So really look at the first two things that I talked about. Most likely that's the causative reason for you. And then if it's a kidney, get in touch with us here at Hippocrates. I'll give you some further advice on that. And by the way, just go light on the oils. That's always been our belief here, not to wipe them out completely, but to go light on them.